Hello everyone, in this unit we'll learn how to talk about past habits. When we talk about our past, we may want to mention things that we used to do on a regular basis or repeatedly, and so we can say, for example, I used to be a very responsible student, or I used to study by the stairs of Low Library. Let's look at some other examples. In the winter, I used to wear warm clothes like coats, scarves, and gloves. I would also play in the snow and make snowmen. I used to wear formal clothes on special occasions, but I didn't used to like wearing a tie. On the weekends, I would go to Liberty Island to chill out. And obviously, I didn't used to drive because I didn't have a car, so I always used to take the subway to go shopping downtown. I would always take my camera with me to grasp meaningful moments in the city life. Let's focus on the language. I would usually take the subway to go shopping downtown. I used to study by the stairs of Low Library. In my free time, I would go for a walk in Central Park. I used to carry my camera to grasp meaningful moments in the city life. We can clearly see that we can talk about past habits or past states by using either would or used to. These are the two forms that we will study in this lesson. First of all, we can use used to with the base form of a verb to talk about past habits. For example, we used to play tennis every day, but now we prefer golf. Used to can also be used to talk about fixed states at some indefinite time in the past. For example, I can say, we used to live in London before we moved to Sydney. The second form that we can use to talk about past habits is would. This is more formal than used to, and we can use it in formal speech, we can use it in writing, but only to talk about past habits. One example is when I was younger, my family would go skiing once a year. So this is exactly the same as my family used to go skiing once a year. But we can see that it's a specific, concrete, physical action. Here we have some other examples. When I was little, we would go for a picnic every Saturday. When I was a student in college, I would spend as little as possible. Whenever there were sports on TV, we just wouldn't do our homework. Before I moved abroad, I wouldn't try anything new. The important thing to remember is that would cannot be used with stative verbs. In other words, verbs that express states such as be or live, thoughts such as believe or think or wish, or feelings such as love or hate or like, or also verbs of ownership like have. We need to use in that case used to. For example, we say we used to live in London before we moved to Sydney, but we cannot say we would live in London before we moved to Sydney. This is not grammatically correct. Let's summarize these rules very quickly. We just used to and would to talk about things in the past which are no longer true now. To talk about states, thoughts, and feelings in the past, we can use only used to, but not would. To talk about habits and repeated actions, we can use either used to or would. Let's practice this quickly with a little exercise. Now, in which of the following we can replace used to with would? I used to live in the dorm on campus. I used to work out every day. I used to hang out with my friends every weekend. I used to be happy and carefree. I used to believe I could achieve anything if I worked hard. I used to wish that I could stay there forever. And I used to go to a Broadway play at least once a month. So, obviously, in the first one, living is a stative verb or a verb of state. We cannot use would. In the second one, we can because working out is a physical activity and we can say I would work out every day. In the next one, it's the same thing. I can say I would hang out with my friends every weekend because it's an action. In the next one, I cannot replace would because be is a verb of state. I used to believe, same thing, we cannot replace believe. We cannot use would instead of used to because believe is a verb of thought. In the next one, it's the same thing. Wishing is an abstract action and we cannot use the verb with. And finally, going is a verb of action, and I can say I would go to a Broadway play at least once a month. That is perfectly fine. So, summarizing, we can use used to, didn't used to, and never used to talk about past habits. In other words, repeated past actions and past states. On the other hand, we can use would or would not in the same way as used to, or when we talk about past habits and repeated actions, but we're not going to use would for past states or thoughts or feelings or ownership verbs. And finally, we can use the simple past for past habits, repeated past actions, and past states, although if the actions are repeated or are habits, it's better to use used to or would if it's an action verb. Another important thing when we use would for past actions is that there should be not only states, but also it must be clear when the action happened. For example, we would text each other every night. We're saying when the thing happened, because if I use it without a time marker, for example, if I say I would have a big cell phone, in that case it becomes a conditional. And also obviously have is a verb of ownership. It's a stative verb. We cannot use it like that. In number 3, the simple past for past habits, repeated actions, and past states can also be used, but obviously with time expressions. For example, I had a big bedroom. I went to bed at 6 p.m. every night. And we are usually going to use the simple past for single completed actions in the past. For example, I watched 3 shows last night. It's an action that started and ended that night. It was not something that happened on a regular basis. We'll finish this lesson by doing the exercises in the book, changing the simple past to would or not when possible, and then when not possible we would use used to. Let's do it. When I was young, I didn't used to have a TV in my room. My older brother used to have one in his. I used to be very jealous, but on the weekends he would let me watch his TV. We used to watch our favorite shows, but I usually would fall asleep halfway through.